Lufia: The Ruins of Lore is a spin-off of the main series that takes place 20 years after the events of the second game, where the world has enjoyed a period of peace. But it's not long until a new threat arises, with a growing military empire on the lookout for a fabled beast that's said to hold the power to conquer the world, and of course it's up to you and your band of heroes to put a stop to their plans. In terms of gameplay, it's a very traditional approach, with it all being divided into equal amounts of exploring and battles, with the adventure taking you across a huge variety of locales, from cozy villages to the depths of the most challenging dungeons, where you get to meet a cast of colourful characters who will join you along the way. When it comes to combat, each of the enemies appear throughout the world on the map, allowing you to avoid them altogether, but should you run into one, you're able to get an extra attack at the beginning of each fight if you approach them from the back or side, and once you're in battle you can use a basic attack, defend, cast magic, or fuse yourself with a monster that you've trained and cared for to make yourself even stronger. There's several of these monsters that can be caught throughout the adventure, and they can make some of the more challenging fights a lot easier, so it's a good idea to seek them out. Unlike most RPGs, you won't be learning new skills as you level up. Sure, your stats will increase, but to unlock new attacks, you'll have to get stuck into the job system and become an apprentice of one of the many different trainers throughout the world. This sees you being able to create different paths for your characters. With a runtime of about 40 to 50 hours, it's a pretty hefty RPG, so if you're a fan of Lufia, or just old school RPGs in general, The Ruins of Lore would make a great addition to your collection. As a longtime fan of Full Metal Alchemist, Stray Rondo on the Game Boy Advance is a great RPG that captures the essence of Arakawa's iconic series, and while it's not a direct adaptation of the source material, it manages to weave a story that nails the tone and themes that fans will know and love. It follows the Elric brothers as they seek redemption for their failed human transmutation, but what begins as a simple mission soon spirals into a high-stakes adventure. You can expect to see many familiar faces throughout the game, with plenty of well-known characters join in the fight as you work towards unraveling the mystery behind a wave of chimera attacks that have begun to plague the world. The story isn't exactly groundbreaking, but where Stray Rondo really excels is with its battle system. That's all heavily reliant on cards that play a major role in each fight. During each encounter, there's a small bar that fills before you can attack, and once it's full, you're free to unleash a variety of different moves, with alchemy in the game working by making use of these cards. There are 4 different types that can be combined to produce different attacks or effects that can be useful both inside and outside of battle, and there's up to 50 different moves for each of the 4 categories, which consist of metal, nature, stone and darkness, so there's a lot to play around with. Now, apart from the main path through the game, there's a selection of side quests that help pad out the experience in meaningful ways that lead to some of the game's best rewards, such as new challenging battles and cards that otherwise would remain unlocked. So if you're fond of the series, this is definitely worth trying out, and even if you're not, it's still a pretty decent RPG that any fan of the genre will be able to get into with ease. Originally releasing for the Super Nintendo, Breath of Fire 2 was a vast improvement over the first game, and the Game Boy Advance version brought with it a few improvements that make it one of the best ways to play it. Set 500 years after the last game, the story centers on an orphan known as Ryu, whose family mysteriously vanished long ago. After his friend is falsely accused of a crime, Ryu embarks on a journey to clear his name, and just like most classic RPGs, it sees you traversing the world and its dungeons in a top-down fashion, collecting treasures, fighting monsters with a menu-driven turn-based system, and strengthening your party members' abilities over time. Each of these members has special skills that can not only be used in battle, but whilst exploring the world as well. For example, one of them can turn into a giant frog and swim across lakes, whilst another can destroy obstacles that block the path forward. Now, the battle system itself is a real standout, and all revolves around each character's unique abilities and traits that bring a wealth of options when it comes to tackling one of the game's many different enemies. Unlike the first game, it's a lot more streamlined, which results in each fight being far more engaging, with it still focusing on the ability to transform into dragons that open up ways to deal out devastating amounts of damage. When all of the enemies have been defeated, you'll gather experience points, which are used to level up your characters, making them stronger and giving them access to new skills and spells that are constantly dealt out as you work towards the end. Even though it's not without its flaws, such as poor pacing and being a bit of a mess when it comes to its localization, it's still a solid adventure that's well worth booting up and playing on the go. Today's video is sponsored by FlexiSpot, who sent on over one of their Lotus Pro gaming chairs that comes in a variety of different colours and packs in some awesome features. My favourite feature by far is the adjustable recline, which is powered by an electric motor and is only a touch away with handy controls on the side of the chair. As you can see, it's got built-in charging with both a USB and USB-C connection, allowing you to keep those controllers topped up whilst gaming, and apart from the reclining feature, it's also able to swivel and rock back and forth when the recliner is down. Here on the left side you've got a small compartment to keep your essentials in, like remotes, controllers, and it can even fit an iPad, which is a really great addition. Finally, the quality of the materials and just how soft it feels to sit on is a huge plus, ensuring that no matter how long you're deciding to game, you'll constantly feel comfortable. So if you're interested in picking one up, head on over to the FlexiSpot website by using the link below. Lunar Legend is a retelling of the Silver Star, which released way back in the early 90s and brings with it several changes that make it one of the best versions of the game, even though it was held back due to the limitations of the Game Boy Advance with the lack of any voice acting or video cutscenes that had become a staple of the series up until that point. It's still one of the better RPGs that you're going to find on the system. For those unfamiliar with its story, it revolves around Alex, a young man living in the peaceful town of Berg, who growing up harboured an ambition to embark on an adventure and explore the world, and this chance comes sooner than he expected, when a seemingly simple treasure hunt transforms into something far more significant. Ultimately, it forces him to become the hero he's always dreamed of. To be fair, the storyline is nothing that you wouldn't have seen before, but what makes it so compelling are the well-executed characters and dialogue, and as you progress through the journey, you'll find yourself caring deeply about their motivations and the journey that they're all on. Now, like many other RPGs, a significant portion of the game involves battling monsters and grinding. However, the battle system is engaging and never feels like a chore. You get a range of options for confronting enemies and get to wield a diverse amount of attacks and magic that increases you advance, which opens up even more possibilities for tackling the numerous threats throughout the game. Lunar Legend feels like the ideal starting point for anyone looking to get into old school RPGs on the Game Boy Advance, and with the story being straightforward yet effective, it allows players of all ages to enjoy it. So if you can find it or are looking for a new RPG to emulate, Lunar Legend would be a great choice. Way back in 1995, Nintendo released an RPG on the Super Nintendo known as Earthbound. By placing the game in a more contemporary era, rather than a medieval one like Final Fantasy, it deviated from the standard RPG design of its time, and instead of fighting monsters with swords and axes, you wielded baseball bats, yo-yos, and psychic powers. It wasn't a huge success when it first released, but would go on to gain a cult following who still to this day haven't managed to get their hands on its sequel, Mother 3, as it's never made the journey west and has long been one of those games that are stuck in Japan. In many ways, Mother 3 and Earthbound are quite similar. Both games include a modern scenario, comparable graphics and similar gameplay, and to develop the plot you move around the many locations fighting monsters, accumulating experience and interacting with NPCs, which add a nice amount of levity to the events that transpire. When it comes to combat encounters, they aren't random, but instead each enemy is visible on the screen, and you get to choose whether to engage with them or flee as you wish. At first glance, the battles seem pretty traditional, with characters taking turns using melee and psychic attacks to fight enemies, but what helps it stand out is how HP is handled in the game. When an enemy attacks, all the damage they've done is not applied at one time, and instead trickles down slowly, allowing you to take advantage of the extra time given to you to cast a heal or counter attack before the damage is dealt. With its unique gameplay, dark and serious yet humorous storyline, and memorable characters, Mother 3 is one of those games that is absolutely essential to play through. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are essentially remakes of the first games that released for the Game Boy, and bring with them plenty of upgrades and new features that make them a great option for going back and enjoying the early days of the franchise. Like many games in the series, it's the same concept that we've all grown to love or despise, and sees you starting off as a trainer who's tasked with documenting all of the different types of Pokemon throughout the region, and ultimately capturing them and using them for battle as you work towards becoming a Pokemon champion. There's just over 120 Pokemon Pokemon to catch within the game, with the ones you'll miss being able to be acquired through trading with friends, with all of them bringing something different to the table when it comes to fighting. For anyone who's been living under a rock and is not familiar with the series, elements play a major role in each battle, with all of the Pokemon in the game belonging to either one or two of 17 different types. Each of these types brings their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's essential to get to grips with their different qualities in order to come out on top. You get to use one of 4 different attacks during battle, from basic hits to deal damage, or more specific abilities like being able to poison your target or put them to sleep to get the advantage. As your Pokemon grow and gain experience points, you'll slowly level up and unlock new options, which opens up various ways to tackle each encounter, with the key being to build a diverse team that's ready to handle whatever may come your way. As for the several changes and new features, there's a completely new region to take on and a range of quality of life changes that make it a much better version of the original adventure. Even though Pokemon Emerald is a much more feature-rich game, the pure nostalgia is what really drew me to Fire Red and Leaf Green, and if you're a long-time fan of the franchise, it's a great way to relive those memories. Final Fantasy VI has long been considered one of the greatest entries in the series, and it's easy to see why. With its expansive story, wealth of characters and content, as well as a truly engaging battle system, it's easily one of the greatest RPGs that you can find on the Game Boy Advance. If you ever played the Super Nintendo version, there's very little that's new, with it focusing on a group of characters that reside in a world following the War of the Magi. This war took place in ancient times that consumed all of the remnants of magic from the kingdom, but now an evil empire has discovered how to harness this forgotten power thanks to a young woman known as Terra. After you break her free, you embark on a journey where you can amass up to 14 party members, each with their own story to tell and of course unique skills to bring to each fight. You can only have 4 of them active at any one time, with each of their abilities making them different from each other. For example, Sabin can use blitzes, which are special attacks that require a small button combination before execution. A character like Edgar has the ability to use tools like a chainsaw and a drill amongst others, whereas Celeste has a runic ability that allows her to absorb magic. But lying at the center of the system though is the use of espers, which are essentially magical creatures that can be equipped by each character and have many different uses throughout the game. First off, you can summon them into battle to fight alongside you, where they'll grant you a level up bonus, making it a great way to increase your stats. But the most important feature is how they can teach you magic. If you've got one equipped, you'll earn AP points at the end of each fight, which can then be used on unlocking some of the more powerful spells or skills throughout the game, and it soon becomes rather addictive trying to earn them all. Ultimately, Final Fantasy VI is one of the greatest RPGs of all time, and with the GBA version, it's the perfect companion to have with you on the go. The Game Boy Advance was one of the best handhelds to own when it came to RPGs, with the likes of Riviera and Golden Sun being huge successes, but one that never got its chance to shine was Magical Vacation. The narrative begins with a group of friends from a magical school taking a vacation during the summer. On one of their adventures, they stumble upon a cave that just so happens to be inhabited by monsters known as Enigmas, and half of the group end up being transported to another world as a result. It's then up to you and one of your remaining friends to set out to find them and understand why these monsters have begun to appear throughout the kingdom and ultimately take them down. When it comes to the gameplay, the battle system seems pretty basic at first and sees you having up to 6 party members to contend with at any one time. You've got the standard attack, magic, defend and item options, but what helps set the combat apart from other games on the system is the inclusion of spirits known as Serai. These are little creatures that can be found throughout your travels that have an affinity with a certain element. They can be summoned during battle depending on if one of your party members matches their specific type of element, and provide up to 4 times the amount of damage that your regular attacks would deal. This strategic aspect to the combat adds a nice amount of depth to even the most trivial of encounters and really comes into play during the several more challenging boss fights that await you. When it comes down to it, Magical Vacation is a great example of one of the finest RPGs on the Game Boy Advance that never left Japan. So if you fancy jumping into a charming adventure you can take with you on the go, Magical Vacation will not disappoint. Golden Sun was one of the first RPGs for the Game Boy Advance and would end up being one of the finest examples on the system, mainly due to the way it utilised the power of the handheld and brought each and every battle to life through the use of a pseudo 3D effect that was truly impressive for its time. When it comes to the adventure itself, the game opens up in the quiet village of Vale, which is home to adepts, masters of the art of synergy, which is basically the game's version of magic. You take on the role of Isaac, who journeys throughout the world along with his friends to put a stop to the evil schemes of a sinister group who are hell-bent on releasing the power of alchemy to reign over the land. You can expect the usual formula that'll see you travelling from town to town, battling your way through dungeons, solving fairly basic puzzles, and fighting plenty of tough bosses along the way. But what makes it differ from the other RPGs on the system is the inclusion of two separate aspects that help it transcend from the norm. First are the numerous hidden creatures roaming around the world known as Jinn, and after battling and defeating them, they'll usually join your party where you're free to assign them to your members that will add or deduct abilities and alter their stats. In addition to Jinn, the game features synergy, which ties in closely to these creatures and allows for a number of special abilities that can be used both in and outside of battle. This includes whirlwinds that can be used to reveal hidden caves, or being able to move gigantic rocks blocking the path forward, as well as healing and much more, with them all becoming a really useful mechanic during many of the different situations you'll find yourself in. Overall, it's easy to say that this is one of the better options when it comes to turn-based RPGs on the Game Boy Advance, with its great mix of puzzles and battles, as well as a wealth of customization and plenty of twists and turns in the story to keep you engaged. So if you're looking to jump into a new adventure, Golden Sun is a game not to miss. Oriental Blue is an RPG developed by Red Entertainment and Hudson Soft. It's heavily based on Asian mythology and sees you taking on the role of one of two characters who each have their own separate stories to follow. It's a pretty standard JRPG on the surface, with its overworld, turn-based combat, towns, dungeons and inns. However, the story can change depending on what you do. Go into different areas, talking to certain people, winning or losing major battles can all alter future events, which is always noted in your journal. There isn't multiple endings, but the way you reach that point is pretty much up to you. The sense of freedom that you're given to explore the world is a truly unique aspect of the game, and really helps promote subsequent playthroughs once you've beaten it, in order to see everything that the game has in store. Of course, this all sounds great, but without a solid battle system to back it up, it wouldn't mean jack, and thankfully Oriental Blue doesn't disappoint when it comes to this department as well. Each encounter is presented in a turn-based fashion, with the player possessing a range of abilities to utilize, such as basic attacks and magic, which are all percentage based rather than set to fixed amounts of damage, so the skills you have at the beginning of the game are just as useful at the end. Throughout the world, you'll come into contact with items known as magic stones, which have the ability to affect the game in a huge way and are used in conjunction with MP to cast magic. They also grant the player the power to modify their equipment and skill set in order to increase your proficiency in battle, and this system was by far one of my favourite aspects of the game, as it allows you to build your characters as you see fit. When it comes to RPGs on the Game Boy Advance, Oriental Blue is one game you do not want to pass up. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos, and you can also follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Ophidian Mind, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining the Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you can find all of these links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. Your support means the world to me, so until next time, take care.